Cool.
All right, so what's the program about?
Well, the PILA kind of collaboration that kind of has been going on started in Menorca, and Hauserworth had a space that was two-pronged. So it had an exhibition space, and it also had this other possibility, and they weren't going to use it, and they said, well, that's the education lab. And I thought that it would be really interesting to activate that space. And this was 2 years ago, but what I was constantly seeing was that people were migrating and across the Mediterranean, and we were all seeing these pictures of Haitian people, of Africans, of people from all over the world in these boats, some being rescued, some dying, and they're just fleeing because of wars, because of famines, because of power, really power, these kind of man playing power games, but these are the real people. And I just thought it would be a really interesting to work with a group of young people that we really created a map of the world, and we kind of talked about migration as a larger issue, as something that's constant. I mean, if you kind of think about Ellis Island, these people were migrating. If you think about what's happening at the southern border in Los Angeles and Tijuana, these people are migrating because of fear, because of death, because of violence, because of hunger, because of economic disparities. But I think about my own people and the Great Migration that happened in this country at the early part of the 20th century, moving out of the southern states where the Jim Crow laws and where the violence against black people was just overwhelming, and many of them moving to the south, moving out of the South and moving to Chicago and moving to cities that would be more welcoming. And this idea that we think it can be a half an hour that people have to grab everything and go. Some have a little bit more time to really pack up their things and grow. And so this idea that migration is still happening, and it's still happening under dire situations, that people are in crisis. And I think a lot of people don't want to leave home, but if home is in the mouth of a shark, you're probably going to try to get out of the mouth of the shark. So I think I wanted to create something and work with young people to make them understand that this is still alive, this is still happening, this is part of a global conversation. And what they do is they create these world maps, and they create their voice in these maps, and then they have to chisel it away. So what happens is that the only thing that's left are these little fragments of memory. And oftentimes that's what happens when you have to leave. You have a half an hour to put everything in a suitcase, and you're not going to be able to take everything. So this piece is really about, it starts off hopeful, and then it's about loss, and it's about memory, and it's about perseverance. Because this physical hacking and is about memory and carving down into something. And oftentimes when you migrate, my grandmother would tell me stories. I'm just listening to her stories about her leaving the South, or my mother. And so I wanted them to go through these series of experiences while they were building this kind of global world of the North American, which that map in itself is problematic because it shows North America as being much larger. It was a distortion originally. And maps and ownership of place is only because of war and because of power. And that's constantly shifting. We can talk about what's happening in the Ukraine at the very moment, and we can talk about borders, these borders that we protect and then tear down and make new borders. And so I think that's where it came out of, this whole project.
That's beautiful.
Was that okay?
And then let's talk about call to action, like for yourself as an artist, and how like this process is a call to action in a sense, and then talk about the process of this and how we can like reflect with that with the meeting?
Yeah, I think every artist kind of decides what works for them. Some artists are very interested in kind of having a practice that really takes on theology and policy, and some artists really are they really like to be kind of singular and in their own studios or in their own spaces. So I don't really feel like artists have a responsibility if they don't choose to. I feel like if certain artists choose to, which for me has always been part of my practice, and it's nice to find other like-minded people. For me, it always has been really organic. It wasn't something that, it's all me. It's all me, from art and practice to working with educational spaces, to my studio, to listen to Beyonce's new song. It's just all me. It's like all me. And what I've stopped doing is trying to separate. I just think that artists maybe have been given a very narrow definition of a larger romantic narrative of what it means to be an artist. If you see oftentimes anything on Netflix or something, and you'll see the depictions of artists, I kind of roll my eyes, it's like, oh, like really? So this idea, I think that what would be more helpful is to expand the narrative of what it means to be an artist. We don't have to keep comma, artist / activist / I just think that we need to expand the definition and the possibilities of what it means to be an artist. And then each artist can define that for himself. I think it has to do with race and gender and sexuality. You will define as you move along what that means for you. So I wouldn't say that any of this has changed. I've had all of this in me, but there's been different moments in my career where I would privilege one part over another. And then I would move along, and I found that I had more space for, say, the education part and not a little less of the studio part. And I think that just has to do with time, headspace, desire, and that changes constantly.
I want to tie it more in with the program and how you feel like the program will affect the students.
Yes, I feel that this program will affect the students because it will have a conversation about migration. It will have a conversation about kind of a global, what makes migration, for them to really think about what makes migration and why, and also about class, who migrates and who doesn't migrate, and about race. All these things are just part of the program, and you don't have to kind of beat them over the head. You just kind of put the chess pieces there and they move them around. I don't think that arts education should be dumbed down. I think that we can infuse it with real political content, real content that they can learn things from and take it into their, and I don't think that they're ever too young to start that. If you look at some of the really interesting content that's, you can say TikTok. I mean, these are young people, they're 13 and 14 years old, designing their own videos and making their backdrops, and creativity is still alive. And so with this one, there's a lot of sophisticated content that we're talking about. We're talking about global crises, we're talking about migrations, we're talking about race, gender, we're talking about violence, we're talking about policies, but yet they're just interacting with it. And I think that what they will take away is a broader view of these issues, but also it just became like they owned it. They took ownership of the project. That's what I really love, is when I walked in, I really felt like they were taking ownership of the project. And the conversations that were happening, they can't not happen because they're painting continents, they're painting territories, and the stacks of billboards that we kind of get throughout the city, and kind of, I don't think that they could possibly go away and not understand some of these pressing issues in this project. Does that make?
That was great.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you want to trick them, but the best art that I ever saw was when people didn't tell me it was art. They let me enter into a space and they let me kind of figure it out. Being super intimidated was, this is art, here it is. And then you have to interact with it. And I'm gonna tell you. It's the same thing with policy. These are the policies and you have to have a position on them. I think it's more to let them kind of present something and let them move through it and decide what it means to them, what it means to their voice, how they're going to articulate with it, how they're going to live with it, instead of this didacticness of telling them what they should be feeling about this. I haven't told anyone what they should be feeling about the things that we're talking about, these migrations and wars and everything. They come to me and they tell me what they feel. And that's what I think is when it gets more than just, it becomes part of their soul. And I think that something, when it gets down in you, it germinates, it becomes something, it becomes part of who you are. And man, they're gonna go all over the world and do all kinds of things, and hopefully some of this will be germinating in there. And then I kind of step back. I'm not a teacher, I'm more of a facilitator. I just kind of put the pieces there, step back, and let them kind of, I've never taught actually, so I wouldn't know. I'd probably be a lousy teacher, actually.
A lot of the students said that they didn't even know what they were applying for, they were just interested.
Yeah.
And that they were so glad that they applied because they had no idea.
They just took a leap of faith, which I really, really like. And this whole, I'd love to see when young people are activated, just excited, just activated. I love when they own things and they're just activated. I don't really have a lot of, I just like to see them activated. And it feels like this project is really activated, and it feels like it could go. The great part, we could replicate it again. Like we could do it again. Like it would change because it feels different in Los Angeles than in Menorca. Really, in Menorca, it was really about the Mediterranean. But in Los Angeles, I really feel the southern border and people moving in from. You can see the migrant camps in Tijuana and moving because out of Guatemala and Central America because of war and because of violence. And so you really feel it much more being in Los Angeles. When I did it in Menorca, you really felt the Mediterranean. But here it feels like the land, the earth, these people are walking. In Menorca, it felt like the ocean. But this is as I'm speaking, there are people walking to the southern border. They left behind families, friends, possessions. They're carrying their children. They're carrying each other. As we are speaking, that is happening. That is as alive as you can get. And that's something I hope that they take with them. That's something that I hope that we take responsibility for that. That we take responsibility for that.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to say?
No, that was.
Is there any other questions you have?
I have one question for him.
Oh shit. That's Ohenia. Oh, she's gonna come over here.
How does art change lives?
Ooh, Annie, how does art change lives? Slowly, you know, slowly. Art changes lives slowly if you have a relationship to it. I think that's a big question. I tend to be more, how does art change lives, or how does life change art? So you can go either way with it. For me, life changes art constantly. It's constantly being changed. And I think that art, in its best, can shape shift too to change lives. I think it's a relational thing. Does that make sense? Some big philosophical question, girl. I thought you were going to say something like, do you like Beyonce's new song? I was like, yeah. You know, or Drake's new song, you know. You know. But I think that it's never too early to treat young creative people as if they have value and that their voice has value. And when I say young creatives, because that's my tribe, but it's never too early to say what you're doing has value. We say that very quickly if young people test very high and, we're very quick to tell you, my son is, in the special, my son is academically or sports-wise. My son is, we're very quick. It can happen at 10 and 11, 7, that we tell them that they have value for their brains or value for their brawn. But what happens oftentimes with the creatives, we kind of get sidelined, kind of like the quiet, weird kid in the corner. I think that it's never too early to tell those young creative weirdos that they have value, that we hear you, that you have value, and it is not too early for your voice, and it's not too early for you to stand up. And if people don't think that you have value, then you think that you have value. I mean, I was a kid like that, and I did not think that I had value. And it took me a really, really long time to find tribes of people that said I had value. And maybe that is why I do arts education, because when I look at those kids, that's my tribe. I see those little, you know, and their voices are a little different, and their voices are maybe a little more delicate or a little shy or whatever. But we do get sidelined. We are not equal. And we don't ever have to worry about which voices get value first, because they tell us that we're not the ones that, when they do the, what do you call it, bring jobs, what does your teacher, you bring them to school.
Yeah, bring your kid to school day.
I never saw the artist. I saw the fireman, I saw the doctor, I saw the success, or the basketball player or the football player. So I think that there is also a part of me that feels just like the people and the young people in the PILA program. They are me, I'm them. I'm just down the line a little bit further. And so by being here with them, not Mark Bradford being here, but being here as just a grown-up weirdo, means a lot to me. It heals something in me, right? Because you pass on. So I think that's also another reason why I do it.
You got a lot.
Thank
You got
you.
a lot, absolutely.
It's gonna be hard to cut back now.
I get very